The rate and breadth of migration increased in the 15th century with the European age of exploration. As Spain, Portugal, Great Britain, France, and other countries sought resources and markets around the world, they spread their cultural influences. By the early 20th century, most of the world had, at times, been colonized by Europeans. As a result of colonization, European languages, religion, and culture spread across the globe. Throughout the Western Hemisphere, indigenous populations and their cultures were nearly wiped out by European diseases and replaced by European cultures. As a result, European languages and Christianity dominated the hemisphere. In contrast, in Africa and Asia, people shared the same diseases carried by Europeans. So there, European cultures mixed with the existing cultures. Many people largely kept their traditional languages and religions, but some learned to speak European languages and converted to European religions. The diffusion of goods and ideas went both ways between Europeans and their colonies. Goods such as cotton, tea, coffee, sugar, silver, and diamonds poured into Europe from around the world. Europeans absorbed new words from other languages. From South Asia, English added words as diverse as pajamas, avatar, and bungalow, and practices such as yoga. One of the most important results of European expansion was the Atlantic slave trade. This was the largest example in history of forced migration, a type of movement in which people do not choose to relocate, but do so under the threat of violence. In the 15th through the 19th centuries, about 12.5 million Africans were captured, enslaved, and forcibly removed from their homes in Africa to North America, the Caribbean, and South America. While the Atlantic slave trade ended in the 19th century, slavery still exists today. The United Nations estimates that around 21 million people worldwide are victimized by forced labor, 5 times the number of African Americans enslaved in the United States in 1860. Forced migration can result from political and environmental crises that threaten people's lives. Since such migrants usually flee quickly in order to stay alive, they cannot bring many items with them. Most intend to return to their homes once the danger has passed. If these migrants move to another part of the same country, they are classified as internally displaced persons. If they cross international borders and they have well-founded fear that they will be harmed if they return home, then they are considered refugees. The Syrian civil war that began in 2011 forced half the population to flee, resulting in over 6 million internally displaced persons and over 4 million refugees. Since the mid-20th century, migration flows have changed. Europe, once a region where people were leaving, is now a destination for migrants from around the world. Many come from former European colonies in the Middle East, South Asia, and West Africa. These immigrants are usually seeking jobs as guest workers or to unify with family members. The migration to Europe is one example of a global pattern known as chain migration, which is when people move to communities where relatives or friends migrated previously. Chain migration increases migrant streams from one area to another as a result of kinship links or other social and political connections. It also results in the formation of ethnic enclaves or neighborhoods that are filled primarily with people of the same ethnic group. The United States has experienced several trends in immigration and forced migration from other countries. Between 1500 and 1700, European countries raced to colonize North America. By 1700, North America had been claimed primarily by England, France, and Spain. However, major sources of migrants entering the United States have shifted over time. Beginning with the enslaved Africans from the 1600s to the early 19th century, or throughout the 19th century of Northern and Western Europeans, to the early 20th century, where we saw a surge of Southern and Eastern Europeans, and from the mid-20th century to today, we see migrants from Latin America and Asia. While some countries around the world have encouraged immigrants, others have actively restricted the flow of migration into their countries. Many countries have largely relied on immigrants to improve their economies. However, many people have cultural and political biases against immigrants and try to keep them out. Until the 1800s, the United States government placed few restrictions on immigration. The ratio of farmland to the number of people to work was high, so immigrants were often welcomed. In addition, most people recalled with pride their own immigrant ancestors. One policy that attracted immigrants was the Homestead Act, a program in which the U.S. government gave land to settlers willing to stay and farm it for 5 years. After that time, the land became the property of the settler. Currently, the U.S. government offers visas to migrants who are well educated, hoping to get them to remain in the country. Many countries have guest worker programs to attract immigrants to do hard, unpleasant work. These programs allow the immigrants to improve their fortunes in their new countries. Most countries also have family reunification policies, allowing the migrants to sponsor family members to migrate to the country. Other policies include allowing refugees to migrate quickly in emergency situations and allowing foreign college students an easy pathway to becoming permanent residents after they graduate. But countries often pass laws to restrict immigration as well. They can make entering the country difficult by establishing educational standards for immigrants or by restricting the type of work that immigrants can do. Or countries can simply set a quota to limit the number of people allowed to enter the country legally. Some policies to restrict immigration reflect xenophobia, a strong dislike of people who practice another culture. Other restrictions are based in economics. People fear immigrants will take their jobs. In the United States, xenophobia and economic fears combined to prompt Congress to pass laws that banned nearly all immigration from China between 1882 and 1943. Countries sometimes restrict immigration primarily in an attempt to preserve their own cultural homogeneity. For example, the people of Japan form one of the most ethnically similar countries in the world. Japan maintains this by sharply limiting immigration, even though its population pyramid indicates that it faces a shortage of working-age people and would benefit from immigration. There are several effects, both positive and negative, that migration has on the countries of origin as well as on the destination countries. Effects include ones that are demographic, economic, cultural, and political. One positive effect on the countries of origin is relief from overcrowding. When countries have too many people, opportunities are scarce. As migrants leave in search of better lives, overcrowding problems are lessened. Migration can also have negative effects on the places people are leaving. If the working age people leave, the area of migration is left with a population skewed towards the elderly and children. Economically, this creates a dependency ratio problem. Culturally, it can undercut the traditional family structure. Both of these have occurred during China's rural to urban migration, which is the largest migration within a country in history. When migration out of a country is made up of many highly skilled people, it's called a brain drain. Today, students from around the world enter the United States or Great Britain to study medicine, engineering, or other fields and decide to stay rather than to return to the land of their birth. This creates a brain drain on their countries of origin. A recent United Nations report found that about 11% of Africans with graduate or professional degrees were living in the United States, Europe, or other developed countries. Countries receiving immigrants usually benefit greatly. Immigrants make cultural contributions to their new countries, including new foods, new words and languages, diverse forms of entertainment, and a variety of religious traditions. In addition, because most immigrants want to better their economic situations, they're highly motivated to get an education, work hard, and succeed. Many start businesses. Immigrants often start small, labor-intensive businesses such as restaurants, nail salons, and other service-oriented enterprises. But not all of these businesses stay small. Nearly 200 of the 500 largest businesses in the world were started by immigrants or their children. Since immigrants generally move from poorer regions to wealthier ones, they often can afford to make remittances, which is money that they send to their family and friends in the country they left. Remittances help the individuals receiving them and account for nearly 40% of the income of some small countries, such as the Central Asian countries of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. According to the World Bank, the United States and Saudi Arabia are among the leading countries as origins of remittance. India and China are often the leading countries as recipients of remittances. Conflict sometimes arises between immigrants and native-born citizens. The two groups might clash over religious beliefs, cultural practices, or access to jobs. Countries sometimes pass laws and businesses follow practices that discriminate against immigrants. The political cartoon you see on this slide reflects that point of view.